can't leave you alone. I'm never gonna leave you alone. We stuck together. You my best friend, you my best friend.
Now I ain't never been with a baddie. She calm, so I add her to the tally. Here we go. So
on October 2nd, 2024, in Houston, Texas, 32-year-old Jackelyn Wilson was murdered in her own apartment. Just 48 hours earlier, she had made the brave decision to end her relationship with Howard Ruffin by removing his belongings from her home. This single act, a declaration of freedom after 5 years of abuse, would cost her life. The clock was ticking from the moment Ruffin was released on a mere $7,500 bond after a felony assault charge. The system that should have protected Jackelyn failed at multiple points. County jurisdictions didn't communicate, threats went unreported, and within just 2 days of Jackelyn asserting her independence, Ruffin entered her apartment at 8 a.m. and shot her multiple times while her young children were present. This isn't just another domestic violence story. This is about a woman who did everything right, yet still became a victim of a preventable tragedy. Jackelyn Wilson's identity centered around being a devoted mother to her 4 children. Her daily life in Houston revolved around nurturing them, ensuring they were fed, clothed, and loved unconditionally. Neighbors described her as attentive and protective, often seen playing with her children in the community spaces of Willow Green Apartments. Her mother, Denise Bibbs, recalled how Jackelyn would sacrifice her own needs to provide for her kids, working diligently to create stability despite the chaos that increasingly defined her relationship. The children, including the 4-year-old and 7-year-old who would later witness the unthinkable, were Jackelyn's world. She lived for those children, one neighbor commented. Everything she did was for them. What makes this story particularly heartbreaking is how Jackelyn's final act, attempting to break free from abuse, was motivated by her desire to create a safer environment for the children she cherished above all else. What began as a promising relationship between Jackelyn and Howard Ruffin gradually transformed into a dangerous situation marked by control and intimidation. Over 5 years, the dynamic shifted from affection to fear as Ruffin's behavior became increasingly volatile. The first documented incident occurred in 2022, when Ruffin was charged with felony assault after choking Jackelyn. Despite visible injuries and the serious nature of the crime, systemic breakdowns allowed him to be released on bond with minimal supervision. Throughout their relationship, Ruffin demonstrated classic patterns of an abuser, isolating Jackelyn from support networks, alternating between affection and aggression, and making her feel responsible for his emotional state. Those close to Jackelyn noted the changes in her demeanor, becoming quieter, more anxious, and increasingly fearful of upsetting Ruffin. Despite these concerning patterns, the emotional and psychological complexities of abuse made leaving seem impossible, until Jackelyn finally found the courage to try. I need to pause here because what happens next in Jackelyn's story raises important questions about domestic violence that I want us to explore together. Has someone in your life ever shown concerning behavior in a relationship? What signs might indicate that a situation is becoming dangerous? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective could help someone recognize similar patterns in their own life or the life of someone they care about. If you've experienced domestic violence or know someone who has, this video contains information that could literally save lives. Hit the like button to help the algorithm share this critical information with more viewers. Domestic violence thrives in silence, which is why I'm asking you to subscribe and turn on notifications. On this channel, we examine real cases to understand how these tragedies happen and how they can be prevented. Each subscription helps build a community that's informed and vigilant. For those who find value in this content, please share it with someone who might benefit from understanding these dynamics. That single action could be the difference between life and death for someone trapped in a similar situation. Now let's return to the events that led to those fateful 48 hours in Jackelyn Wilson's life. Beyond her role as a mother, Jackelyn maintained deep connections within her Houston neighborhood. At community gatherings, she was known for her warm smile and willingness to lend a helping hand. She organized neighborhood watch meetings and frequently volunteered at local food drives. Her mother, Denise Bibbs, served as her strongest advocate and confidant. Through countless late-night phone calls and Sunday dinners, Denise tried desperately to convince her daughter to leave the increasingly dangerous situation. "I saw the changes in her," Denise later told investigators. "I begged her to come stay with me." Jackelyn's sister and extended family also formed a tight support network, offering babysitting and emotional support. Despite these connections, Jackelyn often concealed the full extent of her troubles, presenting a brave face at family gatherings while privately enduring escalating abuse. This duality, being both a pillar in her community while silently suffering, reflected the complex reality many domestic violence victims navigate daily. The first year between Jackelyn and Howard showed no obvious red flags. Friends described them as seemingly compatible, with Ruffin initially presenting himself as attentive and charming. He brought flowers, remembered important dates, and expressed genuine interest in her children. The transition happened gradually. Small criticisms about her appearance evolved into controlling what she wore. Casual questions about her whereabouts became demands for constant updates. When Jackelyn received a promotion at work, Ruffin's congratulations quickly morphed into accusations that she was neglecting home responsibilities. By year 3, financial control emerged. Ruffin insisted on managing their money, leaving Jackelyn dependent and increasingly isolated. Phone checks became routine, and male contacts disappeared from her phone under his watchful eye. What outsiders observed as occasional arguments masked a disturbing private reality. Verbal tirades, destroyed personal belongings, and physical intimidation that eventually escalated to violence, all while Ruffin maintained a respectable public persona. The breaking point came on June 17, 2022. After accusing Jackelyn of texting another man, Ruffin cornered her in their bedroom. As the argument intensified, he grabbed her by the throat, cutting off her airway for nearly 30 seconds while pinning her against the wall. Only when she began losing consciousness did he release his grip. This assault left visible bruising around her neck and damaged her larynx, temporarily affecting her speech. A concerned coworker noticed her injuries the following day and convinced Jackelyn to file a police report. The responding officer documented the injuries thoroughly, leading to Ruffin's arrest on felony assault charges. However, critical systems failures soon emerged. After being booked in Harris County, Ruffin was released on a $7,500 bond with minimal supervision requirements. The most consequential error occurred when notification systems between neighboring counties failed. Ruffin had prior domestic disturbance calls in adjacent Montgomery County, information that should have triggered enhanced monitoring or higher bail. Instead, these records weren't accessed during his case processing. No ankle monitoring was ordered. No mandatory counseling was required. Most critically, despite the severity of choking as a high-risk indicator for future homicide, Ruffin was permitted to remain in proximity to Jackelyn with only a paper restraining order as protection. The relationship between Jackelyn and Ruffin exemplified what psychologists term coercive control, a sustained pattern of domination using multiple tactics beyond physical violence. This included isolation, intimidation, and creating crushing dependency. A key element was Ruffin's strategic alternation between cruelty and kindness. After violent episodes, he would become exceptionally remorseful, showering Jackelyn with gifts and promises. These periods of calm reinforced her hope that change was possible, creating a traumatic bond that became increasingly difficult to break. Financial entanglement further complicated Jackelyn's ability to leave. With Ruffin controlling household finances and undermining her career advancement, economic independence seemed unattainable. The practical challenges of supporting 4 children alone weighed heavily against her desire for safety. Many questioned why Jackelyn stayed. This common question misunderstands domestic violence psychology. Research shows that women make an average of 7 attempts to leave before successfully escaping an abusive relationship. Each attempt increases danger, as abusers intensify control tactics when they sense losing power. For Jackelyn, Maternal instinct played a paradoxical role. Her desire to provide stability for her children initially kept her in the relationship. Ultimately, however, recognizing the harm her children experienced by witnessing abuse became her strongest motivation to finally leave, a decision that tragically coincided with Ruffin's release from custody. In September 2024, after 5 years of fear and control, Jackelyn finally reached her breaking point. 3 converging factors fueled her decision. First, her oldest son began showing signs of anxiety and aggression at school, behaviors his teacher linked to witnessing domestic tension at home. This revelation devastated Jackelyn, who realized the damage extended beyond herself. Second, a chance encounter with a former colleague who had survived domestic violence provided Jackelyn with practical resources: contact information for legal aid, temporary housing options, and financial assistance programs. Finally, Ruffin's arrest for an unrelated assault charge created a temporary window of physical separation. During those days without his intimidating presence, Jackelyn experienced moments of clarity and peace that strengthened her resolve. She confided in her mother, "I can't do this anymore. The kids deserve better." With Denise's support, Jackelyn methodically began planning her exit, unaware that Ruffin would soon be released on bond. On September 30th, while Ruffin remained temporarily detained, Jackelyn took decisive action. With her brother and cousin providing security, she gathered Ruffin's possessions, clothing, electronics, personal items, and placed them in storage across town. This physical removal represented more than logistics. It was a symbolic reclaiming of her space and autonomy. She changed the locks, reinforced windows, and established new household routines with her children. Surveillance footage from the apartment complex captured Jackelyn appearing visibly relieved that evening, smiling as she returned from dinner with her children, perhaps the first genuine smile neighbors had seen in months. She texted Ruffin's sister about the location of his belongings, asking her to relay the message when he was released. In that communication, she requested space and stated clearly, "This relationship is over. Please tell Howard not to contact me directly." The storage unit key, left with his sister, became Jackelyn's final communication with the Ruffin family. On October 1st, less than 24 hours after being released, Ruffin learned about his relocated belongings. His immediate response revealed his deadly intentions. He called Jackelyn 27 times within 2 hours. When she didn't answer, he began contacting mutual friends, making explicit threats. "She thinks she can just throw me away? I'll make her regret this." At approximately 9:30 p.m., Ruffin appeared at the apartment complex, attempting to enter using his old key. Security footage shows him pounding on Jackelyn's door for 6 minutes before leaving when a neighbor threatened to call police. The next morning, Ruffin's sister contacted Jackelyn with a disturbing message. "He's not thinking clearly. He keeps saying you've ruined his life." Hours later, a neighbor spotted Ruffin sitting in his car across from the bus stop where Jackelyn's children gathered each morning, watching, waiting, planning what would happen next. At this point in Jackelyn's story, we're witnessing the most dangerous moment in domestic violence situations, when the victim takes concrete steps to leave. Experts call this period separation assault, when the risk of homicide increases dramatically. If you're finding value in understanding these dynamics, please take a moment to hit the like button. This helps more people access this potentially life-saving information. I'd like you to consider, what resources exist in your community for domestic violence victims? Do you know how to access emergency protective orders or safe housing? Share what you know in the comments. Your knowledge might guide someone who's silently watching and needs help. For those following this channel, you know we examine these cases not for sensationalism, but to identify intervention points where lives could be saved. If you're new here, consider subscribing to join a community dedicated to understanding and preventing these tragedies. We're about to examine the events of October 2nd, the day everything culminated in violence. Before we continue, please share this video with someone who works in law enforcement, healthcare, education, or social services, professionals who might encounter victims like Jackelyn and need to recognize these critical warning signs. October 2nd began as a routine Wednesday for Jackelyn Wilson. Security cameras at Willow Green Apartments captured her timeline. 6:15 a.m., Jackelyn woke her children, preparing them for school. She made breakfast while helping her 7-year-old with homework, forgotten the night before. 7:10 a.m., she walked her older children to the bus stop at the front of the complex. Security footage shows her hugging them goodbye. 7:25 a.m., Jackelyn returned to her apartment with her 2 youngest children, ages 4 and 7, who weren't scheduled for school until later that morning. 7:52 a.m., Howard Ruffin's vehicle entered the apartment complex parking lot. He parked 3 spaces away from Jackelyn's designated spot. 7:56 a.m., Ruffin approached the apartment building, concealing something under his jacket. He briefly spoke with a maintenance worker who later reported Ruffin seemed unusually calm. 7:58 a.m., Ruffin used a copied key to enter the building's side door, bypassing the main entrance where cameras offered better coverage. 8:01 a.m., Ruffin knocked on Jackelyn's door. Neighbor testimony confirms her voice asking who was there. 8:02 a.m., the door opened. What happened in the next 25 seconds would irreversibly change multiple lives forever. Inside apartment 204, what began as a confrontation escalated almost immediately. Audio captured through adjacent apartment walls revealed Jackelyn's initial reaction. "Howard, you can't be here. You need to leave." His response, captured in the same recording: "You think you can just throw me away like trash after everything I've done for you and these kids?" Forensic analysis later showed that Ruffin had positioned himself between Jackelyn and the front door, blocking her exit. As she reached for her phone, he produced a 9mm handgun purchased illegally after his previous arrest. The physical evidence tells a devastating story. Jackelyn attempted to flee toward the kitchen, evidenced by knocked-over breakfast dishes. Ruffin fired the first shot, striking her in the back. As she turned to face him, he fired 3 more times at close range. The entire confrontation lasted less than half a minute. Neighbors reported hearing Jackelyn's desperate plea, "Please don't, the kids are here," followed by gunshots. Crime scene investigators found Ruffin's footprints tracking through Jackelyn's blood as he calmly exited the apartment, leaving the door open behind him. He made no attempt to hide his identity, looking directly into hallway security cameras before departing. The most devastating aspect of this tragedy was the presence of Jackelyn's 2 youngest children. According to child welfare reports, the 7-year-old had been sitting at the kitchen table finishing breakfast, while the 4-year-old played in the adjacent living room. Both children witnessed the shooting. In the immediate aftermath, the 7-year-old demonstrated remarkable presence of mind, grabbing his younger sibling and rushing to the neighbor's apartment for help. "A boy was pounding on my door, screaming that his mom was hurt," recalled Linda Martinez, who lived across the hall. "When I opened it, he was holding his little brother's hand so tight his knuckles were white." The children were physically unharmed, but suffered profound psychological trauma. Child psychologists would later document their symptoms of PTSD, night terrors, and separation anxiety, invisible wounds that would require years of specialized therapy to address. Their testimony, provided through child advocacy experts, became crucial evidence in the subsequent criminal case. First responders arrived at 8:12 a.m., 10 minutes after the shooting. Despite paramedics' efforts, Jackelyn was pronounced dead at the scene. Police secured a 6-block perimeter, but Ruffin had already fled the area. As news spread through Willow Green Apartments, residents gathered outside, many in tears. Parents rushed home from work, fearing for their children's safety. School officials at the nearby elementary implemented lockdown procedures until authorities confirmed Ruffin had left the vicinity. Denise Bibbs arrived at the scene to the unimaginable task of identifying her daughter's body and taking custody of her traumatized grandchildren. By evening, a spontaneous memorial emerged outside Jackelyn's apartment. Flowers, candles, and handwritten notes expressing collective grief and outrage. Residents organized an impromptu vigil, where neighbors shared stories of Jackelyn's kindness and voiced their frustration with systems that had failed to protect her. Meanwhile, a manhunt for Howard Ruffin was underway across Houston. Howard Ruffin's psychological makeup followed patterns common among domestic homicide perpetrators. Beneath his occasionally charming exterior lay a fragile ego structure, unable to tolerate perceived slights or challenges to his authority. His employment history revealed telling patterns. Ruffin rarely kept jobs longer than 6 months, typically leaving after conflicts with supervisors. Former coworkers described him as initially likable, but quick to perceive disrespect where none existed. Early life trauma played a formative role. Records indicate Ruffin witnessed domestic violence as a child and experienced inconsistent parenting. These experiences likely contributed to his difficulty forming healthy attachments and regulating emotional responses. Most concerning was Ruffin's profound inability to accept responsibility. Police reports from previous incidents showed a consistent pattern of blaming victims for provoking his violence. This externalization of blame allowed him to justify increasingly dangerous behavior while maintaining a self-image as the wronged party, a cognitive distortion that ultimately enabled him to rationalize murder. Ruffin's decision to kill Jackelyn wasn't impulsive, but evolved from specific triggering events that challenged his sense of entitlement and ownership. The primary trigger was Jackelyn's concrete step of removing his belongings, a clear, physical demonstration that she was reclaiming her space and her autonomy. Unlike previous separation attempts where she'd verbally ended things but taken no action, this step represented a tangible loss of access and control that proved intolerable to him. A secondary trigger appeared in text messages recovered from Ruffin's phone. The day before the murder, he discovered Jackelyn had consulted with a family attorney about formalizing custody arrangements. This represented not just personal rejection, but public humiliation and legal constraints on his authority over the children. In Ruffin's distorted thinking, murder became a means of permanent control. If he couldn't possess Jackelyn, no one would. His actions followed the disturbing logic. If she can leave me, I can permanently end her. For abusers like Ruffin, relationships aren't about mutual support, but ownership and dominance. When victims assert independence, this fundamentally threatens the abuser's identity and triggers extreme responses. Experts who analyzed this case noted that Ruffin exhibited textbook behaviors of what researchers call intimate terrorism, a systematic pattern of control tactics including intimidation, isolation, and violence. Unlike situational couple violence, intimate terrorism has one primary goal: absolute domination of the partner. Research on domestic homicides reveals that 75% occur when victims attempt to leave relationships. This period represents the ultimate rejection of the abuser's authority and triggers narcissistic injury, a profound wound to self-image that some individuals cannot tolerate. What makes these situations particularly dangerous is how rejection activates both abandonment fears and rage simultaneously. The emotional dysregulation becomes overwhelming, and violence serves dual purposes: punishment for the perceived betrayal and reassertion of control through the ultimate dominating act. Multiple institutional breakdowns created the conditions for this tragedy. First, inadequate bail conditions following Ruffin's 2022 assault charge failed to recognize choking as a high-risk indicator for future homicide, a connection well established in domestic violence research. Second, critical information sharing failed between Harris and Montgomery counties. Ruffin's previous domestic disturbance calls were never incorporated into risk assessments because database systems weren't integrated across jurisdictions. Third, insufficient monitoring occurred after his release. No GPS tracking was mandated despite his history, allowing him to approach Jackelyn's residence without consequences. Fourth, protective order enforcement relied entirely on victim reporting. When Ruffin appeared at Jackelyn's apartment the night before the murder, the responding officer filed a report but took no action to locate him, a missed final opportunity for intervention. These weren't abstract policy failures, but specific, identifiable gaps where different decisions by authorities might have preserved Jackelyn's life and kept her children from witnessing her murder. Throughout the timeline of Jackelyn's relationship with Ruffin, several crucial indicators of escalating danger went unaddressed. The 2022 choking incident represented the most significant missed opportunity. Medical research consistently identifies non-fatal strangulation as a key predictor of future homicide, increasing risk by 750%. Yet this attack was treated as routine assault rather than attempted homicide. Ruffin's behavior after being served with the restraining order, specifically his statements to friends that papers won't stop me, indicated contempt for legal boundaries, another established risk factor. His social media activity in the weeks before the murder included searching for untraceable firearms and viewing content about men who killed ex-partners. These digital breadcrumbs, discovered only after the murder, might have been detected through more thorough monitoring. Most tellingly, Ruffin's 27 calls within 2 hours after learning about his moved belongings represented a textbook escalation pattern that, had it been reported, could have triggered emergency intervention protocols. The fragmentation of Houston's criminal justice response created fatal gaps in protection. Specific system failures included: the prosecutor's office failed to flag Ruffin's case file as high risk despite the strangulation charge and prior incidents, which should have triggered enhanced bail conditions and monitoring. The bond hearing lasted just 4 minutes, with no victim advocate present to provide context about the relationship history or ongoing threats. When the protective order was issued, no proactive enforcement mechanism existed. The burden remained entirely on Jackelyn to report violations, a dangerous expectation given the power dynamics at play. Most critically, zero follow-up occurred after neighbors reported Ruffin at Jackelyn's apartment the night before the murder. The officer who took the report classified it as a minor violation rather than an imminent threat. These weren't inevitable bureaucratic shortcomings, but specific procedural failures where different decisions and protocols could have interrupted the path to violence. While Jackelyn had family support, what she lacked was access to specialized resources designed specifically for domestic violence situations. Houston has 9 domestic violence organizations offering comprehensive services, including safety planning, emergency shelter, legal advocacy, and transitional housing. None of these resources were connected to Jackelyn's case through formal referrals. Effective support networks function as coordinated systems, not isolated individuals. When professionals from law enforcement, healthcare, social services, and domestic violence advocacy communicate about high-risk cases, protection gaps narrow significantly. Communities with coordinated response teams show 60% fewer domestic homicides than those without such structures. These teams review active cases, pool information across agencies, and implement customized safety strategies. Jackelyn's mother and family did everything within their power to help, but they lacked the specialized knowledge, legal authority, and resources that professional advocates could have provided, particularly during the critical separation period when danger peaked. Jackelyn's case illuminates how current protection systems often fail to address the true nature of intimate partner violence. In Houston alone, domestic violence calls exceed 40,000 annually, with resources stretched beyond capacity. When victims attempt to leave, they face practical barriers beyond physical safety: housing insecurity, economic vulnerability, legal complications around child custody, and the emotional aftermath of trauma. Studies show that victims attempt to leave an average of 7 times before successfully escaping, each attempt increasing danger without adequate protection. The timing of Jackelyn's murder, just 48 hours after asserting independence, aligns with national statistics showing the highest risk occurs within 2 weeks of separation. Legislative changes in other states demonstrate effective alternatives: GPS monitoring for offenders with strangulation history, mandatory danger assessment screening at bail hearings, specialized high-risk teams, and economic support programs that address financial barriers to leaving. Applying these evidence-based approaches could transform outcomes for others facing similar circumstances. Jackelyn Wilson deserved to live. Her children deserved to grow up with their mother. This wasn't an unpredictable tragedy, but a preventable one that demands action from all of us. If this story has affected you, I ask 3 things. First, educate yourself about domestic violence resources in your community. Understanding available support systems means you can guide someone in crisis toward proper help. Share this knowledge in the comments for others in your area. Second, advocate for policy changes. Contact your representatives about strengthening protection orders, implementing GPS monitoring for high-risk offenders, and funding domestic violence services. Small policy changes save lives. Finally, support organizations doing this critical work through donations, volunteering, or simply sharing their information. These groups operate on limited budgets while providing essential services. Please subscribe to this channel as we continue examining these cases not to exploit tragedy, but to prevent future victims. Like and share this video to spread crucial information that could help someone escape a dangerous situation. Jackelyn Wilson was more than a statistic or cautionary tale. She was a loving mother, daughter, friend, and community member whose life mattered. By learning from her story and taking concrete action, we honor her memory in the most meaningful way possible, by helping others survive.